Hi, everybody. I'm Judy the YouTube Lawyer. Today, we're going to be covering 3 different criminal cases that have been in the news pretty recently. First, we're going to briefly remark on the Sweetie Pie's murder for hire sentencing. And next, we're going to cover the Craigslist sale murder of Andy Banks. The verdict just was announced this evening. That's pretty big news, especially around North Carolina. And then we're going to touch on the Shanquella Robinson murder. And today I am so lucky to have frequent guest Marcus Weeks. He's an attorney in Washington, D.C., who had actually practiced criminal defense in North Carolina for a number of years before he moved on to work for the federal government. So let's welcome Marcus to the stream. Hi, Marcus. Thank you for being here again.
Hey, what's going on, Judy? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. And just to talk some more about your qualifications for people who aren't familiar, you are a graduate of NC Central Law School, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also did criminal defense and worked as a public defender.
Definitely. Yep.
Okay, great. So you are very qualified to be the guest commentator today. And I think we also are going to have some other attorneys in the live stream too. So later on, we'll invite some people to join in if they feel like being on camera.
Outstanding.
Okay, great. So let's touch on the Sweetie Pie's murder first. You and I already did a much longer live stream about a month ago, I think, when we talked about this whole case. And it's very interesting because it involves a reality show that was on the Oprah network called Welcome to Sweetie Pies. So you're a fan of that show, right?
Yeah, by proxy, because my wife was a fan, so I got forced into a few episodes.
Yeah. So what do you think of the show?
The show was interesting. It was funny, because the few episodes that I watched, it was funny because now that I think about it, and we talked about this in the previous stream, I could see the point of contention between the grandson and the son, how the grandson was being given so much flexibility because he was young, he was just graduating, he was given a lot of opportunity, and you can see how the owner's son was a little bit jealous of that. There was always this point of contention between him wanting more authority than what his mother was willing to give him. So it was interesting to see that as this case played out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as someone who's kind of late to the show, I never actually watched it when it was actually on the air. It's very interesting to go back on YouTube and see these old episodes. And for people who aren't familiar with the show, Tim Norman is the main character's son. So the main character was Robbie Montgomery, who is famous for being a singer and a dancer. She worked with Ike and Tina Turner back in the 1960s. So she had a soul food restaurant that started out in St. Louis called Sweetie Pie's. And her son, Tim Norman, has been convicted of first-degree murder. And he's going to be sentenced not until March, though. That's kind of surprising, for the murder for hire of his nephew, Andre Montgomery, who was shot down back in 2016. So do you think it's kind of weird that Tim got convicted a couple of months ago, I think, but yet the sentencing isn't until March?
Right. I saw that. I thought that was really odd, especially considering the nature of the charges. It's one thing, it's not uncommon for sentencing dates to be pushed out when you're talking about, maybe something where there's property at issue and some repayment of monies. But when you're talking about murder and murder for hire, those normally don't get pushed out so far. So it is odd to see that sentencing would be pushed out so far, because there's nothing he can really do. The only reason you would push that out as a defense attorney is to allow your client to do something to put themselves in a better position for sentencing, so you can maybe get something a little bit more lenient. But with those charges, I don't care. He could do anything he want to do. It's not going to make any judge give him any leeway based on those charges and that conviction.
Mm-hmm. Well, can't his attorney gather up letters from his friends and family, talking about what a great guy he is? Could that be going on?
That could be going on, but any any judge worth their salt is probably not going to give a rat's you know what about the letters that were sent. It's just a hard sell. It's going to be interesting when the sentencing occurs to see what the reaction was. But that is common. A lot of times they do try to have people, pastors, people in the community, family members, friends, speak up a person to hold them in a better light. But I think that's going to be really problematic because any judge who gives this guy any leniency probably won't be a judge the following year or whenever elections come up. it'll be a problem.
Yeah. And so I flashed up on the screen the latest news. I know it happened a few weeks ago, but Wael Yagnam, who was the insurance agent, they call him Wally, he was sentenced for only 3 years. That's my opinion. I feel like only 3 years? That's crazy. So he was the guy that helped Tim Norman get the insurance policy on Andre. And that was the motive because Tim hated his nephew and he was probably going to get $450,000 of life insurance money if Andre was killed. So,
right. And that's
thanks
right.
to
It's
Wally.
funny. Yeah, it's funny because, like I mentioned before, this guy was a Grammy nominated producer on Nelly's rap album Nellyville, which sold multi-millions of copies. And him trying to facilitate this bogus scheme ended up landing him 3 years in prison. From what I could gather just from reading through open source research, is interesting to see that his sentence seemed a little light, but it didn't look like he had much prior contact with the criminal justice system. I think that was something that probably played very largely in his favor, unlike the Tim, who has prior felony charges for a lot of serious things. So
yeah, and so I was watching some of the YouTube channels that have been covering this case intensively, and one of them, Eat with Phil. So she was reading out all these that on behalf of YL, talking about what a great guy he was. He's a real mentor. He wasn't out for his own personal financial gain, would help other people get a foothold in the music industry. So do you think that kind of weighed on the judge's mind, when the judge sentenced him for 3 years?
it's probably something they took into consideration, but I seriously think the biggest benefit that he had was really his lack of prior contact with the criminal justice system. Because I mean, it's when you start talking about murder for hire plots and those type of things, I mean, you got to look at each participant. I mean, now you're talking about if a person is an accessory before the fact, during the fact, after the fact, and those can, depending on how you're classified, you could be charged as the principal. So it could get kind of complex, but it looked like they clearly identify him as more likely than that an accessory maybe before the fact, and his lack of contact was his biggest asset.
Only conviction. Well, actually, yeah, based on what I've read so far, it looks like Wally was only convicted of mail and wire fraud. So he wasn't even convicted of being an accessory to the murder or conspiracy to murder. So I guess he had a good attorney.
Yeah, definitely took a plea because I could see how he should. I'm sure he should have been charged, but I guarantee you he was willing to testify against Tim because Tim was the last holdout of everyone. He was the one who was going to go down swinging. It looked like because the shooter, the stripper who set everything up, they all kind of took their pleas early on. So
yeah, and so we also heard that Terrell Hill, who was the actual person who shot Andre in the street, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison for murder. And then the stripper, Tim Norman's friend, so she is going to be sentenced sometime in January. Do you have any idea how much time Terica could be facing?
I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to look at what specifically she's pleading guilty to. It's it's clearly not anything associated as a accessory to the murder. I would seriously doubt that, in light of the fact that all these other persons who could have been, you know, along with these conspiracy charges and been accessory during the fact, they appear to kind of skate. So I would probably anticipate, just, without knowing the specifics of her charges or her prior contact with the criminal justice system, she would probably get something. It'll probably be light, somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range. I would be shocked if she get a large amount of time just based on what the insurance guy got. Because I mean, the insurance guy, if you're looking at the conduct that led to this happening, his conduct is just as egregious as hers, if not more egregious. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's all going to depend on her prior contact with the court.
Yeah, although the judge who sentenced Wally said that he didn't believe that that insurance agent knew that this was for a murder, or that a murder was likely to happen. Maybe something bad was going to happen, but not a murder. Like there wasn't proof.
Yeah,
Um, but from the things that I've read and seen on YouTube, it does look like it was pretty shady. A lot of shady business going on between Tim and Wally,
right.
where it wasn't just one insurance policy, but multiple insurance policies that Tim was applying for over and over again, thanks to Wally, the insurance agent. And he kept getting turned down. But then finally, Wally, I think, allegedly coached Tim to
Hmm.
pretend to be Andre and, forge his signatures. And, they were finally able to, con one of the insurance companies to issue that one policy. Yeah. And there was also a rumor that Tim was trying to get life insurance on all the Sweetie Pie's restaurant employees, which
Oh,
sounds really weird.
yeah.
And it's like, what was he planning on doing? People are saying, oh, maybe he was planning on blowing up the whole restaurant while all the employees were working there so he
Yeah.
could collect the money.
Right. It's not above him. It's interesting that you said the judge made that comment, that, he didn't think that the insurance agent, who facilitated these things had as much knowledge. He assumed something bad. I mean, to me, I hate to talk about any jurist, but that goes to show the ignorance of the court. If I'm an insurance agent and I'm helping someone facilitate a life insurance, the only benefit to me is some type of monetary. I don't get any monetary benefit if the guy gets punched in the face and stomped out in the alley. So I think that's a crazy statement, I think, for the judge to make. If I'm an insurance agent and I'm helping you facilitate a bogus policy, the whole point of a payout for insurance policy is life insurance policy is it's called life insurance for a reason, not get your ass whipped insurance or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this goes along with what Southern Law, who is an attorney, I think also in North Carolina, he's saying, but Tim Norman texted the insurance agent that the nephew, quote, ain't going to be around much longer, planning
Right.
to travel. LOL. Nah. Yeah. But I think, wasn't Tim's excuse, or from what I've read, he was claiming like, oh, well, Andre led a, kind of like a risky, shady type of life. And he was hanging around with a bunch of, thugs and rappers. And so, maybe his life was going to be short, as if it wasn't that Andre, it wasn't that Tim was planning to kill him, but rather that Tim was insinuating that Andre had a very, risky type of lifestyle.
Yeah, he did. His biggest risk was his uncle.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and that's just so sad because,
crazy.
you thought, I think the show tried to present this wholesome image where poor Andre's father was killed early on, so he never knew his father, and Tim was supposed to sort of be like a father figure, maybe, but he sure didn't act like one after a while,
Yeah, their
right?
relationship to me appeared more of a sibling rivalry type of relationship. That was from me watching the show. It gave more of a, they were so, even though they were different in age, it was kind of like an older brother, younger brother type of rivalry for affection and mom's business and control to me.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So very sad. But at least Tim did get convicted. Wally's going to spend some time in the slammer and never sell insurance again. And we'll see what happens to Terica Hill. in January. Okay, so let's move on to the big news, which actually I just started reading about it probably less than 2 hours ago, because the verdict came out as guilty against Justin Merritt for the murder of Andy Banks. He was a 39-year-old man here in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was just trying to sell a 2011 Range Rover through Craigslist, although a couple of different news outlets started saying that it was through cargurus.com. So I'm still not 100% sure, but I think the majority of the news outlets have been saying it was through Craigslist.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
So
you know,
what's your commentary about that
I looked
case?
at that case, and before we even talk about this case, just from personal experience, I've tried to sell a car on Craigslist before. And in my experience, it was always the worst of the worst. It was someone who talked as if they were trying to scheme it. It was just absolutely terrible. The few times that I have either sold or purchased, because I purchased my motorcycle off Craigslist, because I looked at the facts and it looked like they met at like a store that was closed down or something to that effect. So
Yeah, the KNW.
yeah, just from
that
a
was
from a
closed.
common sense standpoint, when you're selling anything online, Craigslist, Car Guru, Offered Up, when you're meeting people, you got to meet them in like a public shopping center parking lot where there's a lot of people around, because you have no clue who you're dealing with, and if you're alone, it could facilitate stuff like this happening. So I think that's the from a common sense standpoint, the more crowded, the more people, the better is for these types of transactions. I think that, I don't know. What do you think about? Because I looked at it and I saw it was a first degree murder, premeditation, and deliberation, and that was really the big point of contention. His defense attorney really didn't argue that he didn't do it. His argument was that it wasn't premeditated, it wasn't deliberated, and I see both sides. I honestly think that the argument, in my personal opinion, probably was a little bit more favorable from a defense standpoint. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I thought it was a pretty slam dunk case. Maybe I've only been reading biased journalism or what,
Right.
but I was like, wow, like even in the articles early on about the case, the public defender flat out said, yeah, we admit he shot him. It just wasn't premeditated.
Yeah, but
I'm
that's
like, oh,
yeah,
okay. And then they didn't present any evidence. He didn't testify on his own behalf. So it's like,
right.
well, I mean, just from what I read and what little I saw in the courtroom
Right.
yesterday, I was like, well, he's a goner.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. It was unequivocal that a murder occurred. But I saw the prosecutor use the fact that he shot this individual 5 times as an argument for premeditation. And so it was something to the effect of, if it was something like being frightened or fearful, it would have been one shot. And I actually think that's the opposite. I was like, and I mean, I've grown up around guns all my life and been in war zones. I've seen guns on every front as a civilian and in combat that you can think of. And a lot of times it's the opposite. A person who shoots a weapon out of fear is likely to keep squeezing the trigger
Yeah.
until there's nothing left. Click, 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 click.
Yeah.
Versus, so that was the one thing where I was like, now, did his attorney, question it or present the proper arguments for it? But I think he had a potential argument in his favor to attack at least that premeditation and deliberation part, but definitely guilty of a murder. And it was terrible. He did seem remorseful, though. I mean, from everything I read, he
Yeah.
seemed very remorseful in his
Yeah,
language.
but it's like, why? I mean, yeah, I did see his apology where he's like, his voice is quavering and he's looking down and looking really miserable. And, of course, he's not very eloquent. He could
Right.
hardly complete a full sentence. But I was like, but then why'd you do this? This guy, he had a real job. He was a welder, and it sounded like he was also doing whatever you call it, industrial maintenance or something up in Danville, Virginia. And he was married because his brother-in-law testified against him, about how both of them drove down together along with Mr. Merritt's niece, to do this transaction. So he's
Right.
married, he has 3 sons. It's like, then what was he thinking? Why would you throw away your life like that? Especially after he managed to get out of prison pretty early for his robbery charge.
Right. It was all about it was all about the flex, and he thought he could get away with it. That's the reason that this whole thing happened. It happened because he thought he could get away with it. He said, "Hey, is this abandoned lot? I don't think there's anybody around who will see this." So that was really the reason why it came to a head. He thought he would never get caught. Then, when you look at the evidence on the backside, I'm like, okay, you kept the gun, the vehicle's not parked far from your house. Like, anything stupid that you can do after committing such a crime, this individual did.
Yeah, and obviously he didn't think it out very well because he shot Andy Banks in the car. So, why would you want to drive around some old used car that's got blood and, membranes all over it too?
Right,
That
right,
doesn't make
right.
any sense. Yeah. And just to backtrack a bit about what you said about meeting in a crowded parking lot or something, but
Mhm.
that's not going to help because here, Cameron Village was still pretty crowded on a weekend. And I'm sure Andy Banks felt safe because usually there's a lot of people driving around, but he got back into the car with Merritt, and then who knows when the shooting occurred, but just meeting the guy in a crowded place wasn't going to save him because he
Mm.
was shot inside the vehicle
Yeah,
when
but
they did the test drive.
the other part of it is you have to have some situational awareness. And I'm not blaming the victim by far, but I'm just putting this out so people can know how to do these transactions. I remember when I was purchasing my motorcycle, we were like, "Hey, cash only transaction." So I'm walking around downtown DC. Let's meet downtown somewhere where there's a bunch of people. And he was like, "Oh," and I can remember at this point, I was really a novice when I purchased my first bike. I really didn't know how to ride a bike, I would have did the same approach as a car. I don't need to drive around with you in the vehicle. Hey, we meet here. If it's a cash transaction, you hand me the cash. Here's the keys. If you want to test drive it around the block. And that was kind of how those transactions were done. We literally met right in front of the bank where this individual banked at. And when I wanted to go test drive it, even for cars I purchased, it was a matter of, okay, I'm going to test drive this car. Here's the cash. All the person's contact information. And we were really good about getting everybody's contact information, verifying it by ID card. So if somebody ran off or something, you had some recourse. But, just trying to take those steps, putting yourself in a car with a stranger is a risky position to put yourself in. I don't care what the transaction is or what time of day it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I see the other attorney out there is ready to join us. So if you don't mind, Marcus,
Yeah.
let's have Southern Law join. Hi, hello. I don't even know what your real name is, but you're an attorney in North Carolina, right?
Yeah, my name is Steve, and just listened to all the things Marcus was saying, which completely agree with. Solid
What's going on,
advice.
Steve?
Not too much, man. I agree. You get in the car with somebody and go on a test ride. That's one of the good things about selling bikes. I'm not getting on the back of a bike just to sell it to you. I'll
Definitely.
wait for you to come back.
Right.
Yeah. Southern Law, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I went to Wake Forest Law School and graduated in '94, and have been practicing since then.
Oh,
And
and where's your practice?
mostly civil stuff, not the criminal stuff so much.
And where's your practice, if you don't mind my
Oh,
asking?
I'm in Raleigh.
Oh,
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, great. Okay. Well, who knows? Maybe we've walked past each other around the courthouse then.
Yeah.
Do you work for yourself or with
Yeah, I'm
other
kind of
people?
semi-retired now, and the last major practice stuff I did, I was in-house. So my
Oh,
job was
nice.
to try and stay out of court, but I was a litigation guy before I went in-house. So I've been
Yeah.
there plenty of
Well, I'm
times.
very impressed by your collection of all the legal books. Yeah, I think I got rid of all my law school books by now, and I got rid of all the federal reporters I used to have.
Yeah, nobody wants to read that stuff.
Yeah. So what's your view about this Craigslist case?
Well, I was following the news today, like you guys, and saw that. The last thing I saw just before you started your stream, I guess they've said he gets life with no parole. There's no death penalty hearing or anything like that, and so he was able to stand up and say that he was sorry. And I think even some members of his family gave statements too. talking about the loss of the other family. So at least that's good that that happened. I think so. I think it's all the way over now.
Yeah. Well, I also heard the statements from his brother and his mom, and I think that was his older sister who read the poem. Yeah, it's just so heartbreaking. It's like, what's the point? You know, like the guy didn't even get a car because the car, he abandoned the car or hid it, and you know, it was it was shot up with blood and stuff all over it. So what's the point? Yeah. Southern Law, did you actually go to the courthouse and watch any of the trial?
No, I saw that you were, and then I just caught some of the news stuff this afternoon when it was streaming by, because I guess it happened pretty fast that they got the verdict.
Yes, I was surprised at how quickly the trial was over and, you know, how quickly the jury came back with a verdict, because I thought for sure I could go in next week because I have less work going on. So I would have loved to watch more of the trial. I mean, that attorney, the prosecutor, was so impressive. I really wish I could just sit around the courthouse and go back in and watch some more of his trials and stuff. That guy, Patrick Latour, I think that's his name. Are you guys familiar with that prosecutor?
Mm-mm.
I'm not.
No. Okay. Yeah, he's done a lot of high profile cases, like the one where those two DAs from another county were, what was it? One of them was giving a job to the other person's wife or something.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah, that was about 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but I was like, man, this guy is like some character out of a movie. He was just really calm and cool and collected, and he's just like walking around the courtroom like he owns the place, and he knew how to respond to the objections and the hearsay exceptions. And you know, I felt really sorry for that public defender who had to defend Justin Merritt.
Well, I know Marcus was talking about the premeditation angle that they were trying to make out of the multiple shots, and I couldn't find the charging documents before your stream, but I wondered if they were also had him on felony murder for first degree, because I think he was convicted of robbery too, but I didn't hear anybody mention that, so I didn't know if it really hinged for first degree on just premeditation, or if they also were trying to get him on felony murder too. I don't know. In the end, I guess it doesn't matter. They got him on first degree.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I also wanted to bring up, which, you know, I don't want to give any false facts or something, but when I was in the courtroom for a little bit yesterday, they were showing a video that the police had found on Justin Merritt's cell phone. And the video looked like, I mean, it looked like he had some sort of target shooting paper or something with feet sticking out from the bottom. Because I remember specifically either the prosecutor or the police officer said something about, yeah, you know, there are these sneakers or feet sticking out from underneath the target shooting paper. And I was like, what? Are they alleging that Merritt then took the body and used him for target practice? You know, and then later they showed like a picture of those shoes inside Merritt's home. So, I mean, I don't want to say something that's not true, but, you know, I didn't read about these details in any of the news sources. But I mean, it sounded to me that they were implying that, you know, with the dead body, that maybe he had continued using him for target practice. But
well, that sounds terrible. The news report I saw said that he was shot between 5 and 9 times, and they couldn't tell because of the state of his body. But I would think, if it's between 5 and 9, then probably that is, you know, that, and they found shell casings in the vehicle, I think. So probably it all happened in there. Hopefully, they didn't put a target over him and shoot him again. I don't know what. Maybe it's just what he had to cover him with, or
that's
something.
That's what I'm thinking. I think that it probably goes to just show that, hey, he was intentionally trying to conceal this, you know, with the only means that he had, because you're in a stranger's car, you got to cover it with something. That was probably the only thing that he had to do it. So, yeah.
Well, either way, yeah, very sordid, horrible story. And I was also there when the judge started giving his sort of like a canned speech to all the family members and friends that were sitting there telling them that, hey, we're about ready to be talking about all sorts of gory things about the body and the state of the body. So, if you think it's going to be upsetting to you, you need to leave now. And, if you make any sort of noises or reactions, then we're going to have to remove you from the courtroom, So, but it didn't look like there was anybody there to support Justin. It looked like it was a courtroom full of Andy Banks's family. So, yeah, just feel really sorry for his family, and what a horrible, horrible turn of events. So, yeah. Well, Steve, what about you? Like, have you ever sold anything on Craigslist?
Yeah,
or online?
I try to do it the minimum that I can, just because Craigslist can be kind of weird. Depending on who shows up to buy whatever, or they want to haggle over some minor thing or whatever. But Marcus used some words that are certainly in my vocabulary, which is situational awareness. And if I'm going to sell something online, I try and make sure that I've prepared the potential battlefield before I want to be the weird one.
Right.
I'm going to have more guns there than you do. Let's just put it that way. And places where you don't know where they're being aimed at you.
I like the way you think.
And I'm not test driving in any car with anybody either. Yeah, I like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, I feel like it's not really worth it to sell direct to perfect strangers. I mean, the last time I sold my used car, I just traded it in at CarMax. I was happy with the amount of money they gave me, and then I bought my new used car from CarMax. So, that's what I tell people to do. It's not worth it just to make a few extra thousands of dollars if you could be assaulted or killed by some crazy person.
I tried to sell 2 cars on Craigslist. One was a Maxima, the other one was a Kia that I had. And both times after meeting people, I ended up just donating the cars to charity for a tax write-off. I just was like, you know what? I'm tired of these goofies haggling over everything. And you're like, the car is as is. You either want the damn thing or you don't. And it was really frustrating. So I ended up just donating to those 2 vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, that you always hear about different charities that will accept car donations. So, I'm sure you helped somebody by doing that. Yeah. Yeah. There was one time, like once you have children, you have tons of baby and kid stuff to get rid of nonstop.
Right.
I don't know about you, Steve, but Marcus, I know you have children too. So, yeah. So I remember one time, it wasn't even through Craigslist. It was probably through some Facebook Wake County resale group or something. So this lady came over to the house and she wanted to buy one of those baby swings. So it was way too big for me to just carry it outside. So I let her come all the way up into the house and up the stairs with me to come look at it. And then I started thinking, that was stupid of me. What if she pulled out a knife on me? Or what if she pulled out a gun? Like, I don't know this lady. I mean, she looked nice enough, but you can't be, that was stupid of me. Luckily she was normal and she paid for it. And that was it. But you can't be too safe.
Hey, anytime something like that happens or somebody come over, I mean, and y'all in North Carolina, I was like, no, if I don't know, in those situations, especially if someone like is coming to my house to pick up something, I'm overly cautious with stuff. And it may be my background or me being in the military, but I'm like, I don't know who these people are coming up to pick up this washer and dryer that I want to get rid of. So just in case, I normally don't walk around the house with a pistol on, but I might do it in this instance because you never know what situation you may or may not be in. But that's me. My wife think I'm a little bit crazy, but better safe than sorry.
Yeah. Oh, so you guys, you want to sell your YouTube channels first? Michael wants to know, what does DFD stand for? You can tell us.
Dope father, dude. So I stand for that too, but it actually stands for Debtfree Dad, and my channel is all about finances and me and my family on the journey to become first generation millionaires and pay off a bunch of debt, and we've been making a process. So far, over $200,000 of debt paid off since I started in 2020.
Wow. Congratulations. Awesome. Yeah.
Thank
so to you, do you feel like going to law school was worth it now?
Definitely for me it was. Anytime, it's funny because sometimes on my videos about law school, I always get someone who's on there and I'd be like, man, they make this seem like the worst profession in the world. I'm blessed because I enjoy the type of work that I do. I enjoy the investigations and, white collar crime prosecution. So it works out for me. And I enjoy it. Like I just had this conversation. Everybody talk about financial independence, retire early. I was like, retire early. They may have to take me out on a gurney. That's how much I enjoy my job at this stage. Now that may change in another 5 or 10 years, but right now it's definitely worth it.
Mm-hmm. What about you for you, Steve? Like, did you feel like going to law school was a good decision?
Yeah, I didn't know any lawyers when I applied. I was in the Army, and I thought I wanted to be a DA or whatever, but ended up doing litigation, and that was really fun. And then in-house, and because of that, all over the country with a lot of it. I had an interesting synthesis of government stuff with the company I ended up with, and military background, and traveling to lots of interesting places where the government does interesting things, and just spectacular experience. So it certainly, I've enjoyed it. And, I still help people I know and companies I know and things like that. So it's been certainly a gateway for a lot of great experiences for me. The way you learn to think in law school and apply critical thinking was very helpful in business.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel and what your focus is and why you started it?
Yeah, well, my YouTube channel just used to be gun stuff, but then I don't know.
You're a gun tuber. Now I got to go watch your old videos.
Yeah,
I'm a gun guy.
People are like, oh, your old stuff's kind of different than now. But I started watching some of the cases, especially during COVID. It was at home a lot, and saw some civil cases, the Johnny Depp case and stuff, and then some of the other ones, and thinking, well, you read the documents and maybe you can explain something to people that they don't have any way to know because media is not going to dig into it that way. And then people started asking me questions. So I just started doing it that way, and I try and make videos that my view is maybe not talk about the facts so much, but if there's an angle on process, especially civil kind of procedure, but criminal a little bit, if I can help people to understand what's going on with the system, I think that helps them understand the cases they're interested more. So that's what I've been doing with it lately.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know I need to watch some more of your videos, but I don't even know how I found your channel, but that's really cool to find another local triangle attorney with a channel.
Yeah, the algorithm at work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's how I discovered Marcus. And it wasn't until I asked him to be on my live stream, we realized we actually have some mutual friends and know the same people because he used to practice in Durham. So I was like, that's so funny because his video about whether going to law school was worth it for him, it was how I found his channel. It just popped up as a suggestion on YouTube one day. So that's awesome. Small world. Yeah. Are you guys into soccer? Because thank you, Tom. Who do we think will win the World Cup? I'm just going to guess Brazil, because isn't Brazil one of the countries that usually wins?
Always win. Yeah.
I actually have watched probably about 3 or 4 different games. So it was really exciting watching the USA, Great Britain. Shoot, now I can't even remember what other countries I watched. But yeah, it's actually surprisingly very interesting. What about you, Steve? Are you into soccer?
No, isn't it metric? No. I don't know metric stuff. Just kidding. But it only goes to like 1 or 2 or something. So I'm a little ADD for things without a higher score, and I don't understand it that well. So, but I'm sure it's exciting, and I don't mean to say anything bad about it. It's very exciting, I'm sure.
Well, the feed that I'm watching, it's a Spanish language TV. So it's kind of cool to keep, because I took some Spanish language classes a long time ago. So I can only understand a few words, and then they get all excited whenever there's a goal. And, you hear some words like, what is it? Pelota? Pelota is the ball. Okay, but thank you, Tom Crosnan. And I see that the YouTube celebrity, Eat with Philly Phil here is here. So thank you so much for your super sticker or super chat thing. So thank you. Yeah, it's great to see other YouTubers here. Okay, well, anything else you guys would like to talk about regarding the Craigslist case?
I'm good on my end. Anything else from y'all?
You okay, Steve? Any other comments?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I'm glad it's over.
Yeah. I mean, finally, I mean, that trial just lasted too short, though. I was really hoping to be able to go back in on Monday or Tuesday to watch something, but I've been so busy with work, and now the trial is over. It's too bad it's not televised.
I will say, people think of Cameron Village is kind of a safe place now, but
Yeah.
in the old days, if you've been around Raleigh for a while, Cameron Village used to have a parking deck over it. And then it also had shops underground, which they've totally closed all that off. And that place, you could get murdered like 3 times on the way into the grocery store and 4 times on the way out. It used to be a bad, but then they tore all that down and made it open like it is with nice shops and stuff. So it really is different than because I went to NC State in the 80s, and it was like a hellscape, a dystopian hellscape, and not the nice place that it is now.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you've really lived around Raleigh for a long time then.
In and out, yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea there was an underground part before.
Yeah.
That sounds creepy, though.
It was creepy.
Yeah, because I'm from Atlanta, so I remember going to underground Atlanta a bunch, and it was like a fun, kind of like a shopping mall atmosphere almost, but it is slightly creepy also. So yeah. So speaking on that note, yeah, Angela said she once sold a refrigerator and they came to my house and paid me, but didn't move it for months. It's too weird dealing with the public. Donate, like Marcus said. Yeah, sometimes it's better. It makes you feel better just saying, hey, I donated it to charity, or I just gave it away free to my friend's friend, instead of dealing with all sorts of wishy-washy weird people and then they come to your house or know where you live or whatever.
And if you have something really nice and you donate it, the donation guy will offer to buy it from you himself.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Well, there's all these like buy nothing Facebook groups, and what do you call it? Free cycle. There's nextdoor.com. So, oh, okay. Well, this is great. Maui Swift is saying she likes your channel, Marcus.
Oh, so, yeah. She's a great subscriber, great supporter. I definitely appreciate her.
Yeah, please subscribe to Southern Law also. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to the Shanquella Robinson case, because that has been all in the news. Right. Although I've been following Shanquella's mother on Instagram, and I know the family has really thanked Black Twitter, they call it Black Twitter, for really bringing the news about this case, because otherwise, in the mainstream news, it's not covered as much, although there has been some coverage of the case. So, Steve, are you familiar with the case also?
Yeah, we saw it on the news a little bit back, and I did a little looking at it, because it's like, if an American kills an American somewhere else, it's quite complicated what our government can do about it. It has options, but I'm sure you're going to talk about it. But it's not as straightforward as people think for our government to address the issue.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And, that's not my specialty either, Marcus. So feel free to jump in here. But it sounds like there is an arrest warrant out for Deja Nate Jackson, who is the so-called friend that was seen, beating her up and bashing her head in. But people have also said that the other so-called friend, Wenter, was also the one, grabbing her around her neck and slamming her to the floor, allegedly.
Right.
So,
right.
So it looks like, do you guys think that that Mexico would kind of have dibs on prosecuting her?
Yeah, I'll tell you from my experience, normally, and it's interesting because I just did a little bit of everything, but at some point I used to work at the Department of State, and they kind of have to liaise these interactions when these things occur with in foreign governments, and most times they let the host country handle all the prosecution because the crime actually occurred there. So they'll let it go. The few instances I saw, and this was a while ago, but the very few instances I saw where, and it was a unique situation where the U.S. actually had a lot of leverage to intervene in the case. It was where a crime was attempted in a foreign country, but the conspiracy to commit it actually occurred on U.S. soil. So, that was a very unique and weird situation. I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And, it would have been if, let's say, if we use this and this is just an example, don't nobody watching this think this is what happened. But if multiple friends would have planned this prior to the trip actually occurring, and let's say she didn't pass away, but she just was assaulted real bad. Then you would have that argument where the conspiracy to commit the murder actually occurred on U.S. soil, even though the attempt had actually been facilitated on foreign soil. But most times is the foreign government who takes first dibs at it.
Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think about Dejan Hay Jackson potentially winding up in a Mexican jail? I mean, people are saying those places are horrible.
If she killed somebody down there, then you do the time down there.
Yep. When you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, and that's a prize that she deserves. And I figured early on, I remember someone had asked me about it, a friend of mine's, and I said, this is an easy way for Mexico to curry favor with the United States. It's not like it was a really big public figure, but I said, this one is going to get taken care of on Mexican soil just because it's easy. They have video evidence. They can easily reach out and grab these individuals. But I think I always got to give the cautionary tale. People who assert to be your friend and your associates may not necessarily be your friend or associates. And I grew up in y'all may be able to relate, but I grew up in environments where people would like, hey, go somewhere and hey, drink this, smoke this, and they'll do that solely so that you won't have all of your faculties about you, so they could take advantage of you, so they can, whether it was beat you up or finesse you out of some money or something. So that's something it's really not uncommon for people to travel and try to take advantage of a person like that, especially when you talk about alcohol and drugs and things like that may be involved.
Yeah,
the video is brutal though.
Right.
I didn't even watch it. I was too. I knew I was going to be traumatized and have PTSD if I watched it. But I've read tons of comments and people describing it. So Steve, you're saying you actually watched a full video that's available?
I don't know if it was the full one or not, but it was enough. I couldn't believe that these were people who traveled together somewhere because, like Marcus said, that they had a different attitude about what they wanted to achieve than I suppose she thought. Maybe she thought she was going down there with her friends, but there were at least a couple of them that were doing her some harm on the video I saw. I don't know that that's the video that resulted in her death, but there may have been more than one confrontation down there. But it was bad though.
Right, and it wasn't even indicative of. I've been out with friends in my younger years, and two friends get in a fight, and when friends fight amongst friends, it's just treated way differently than what that video was. If one friend isn't fighting back, the fight's off. They're like, no, we're not going to do it. Or if one friend is clearly won the fight, it's broken up. It wasn't even that type of. It was like a group of people. It actually reminded me of dogfighting. I don't know if you ever seen a dogfighting video, but the way that it was occurring was as if it was like, no, we're going to the death. And the video was really bad. It wasn't even a fight that would be indicative of what would happen if it really was a group of friends. And if y'all two got in a fight, I'm be like, all right, now that's enough. Y'all go to y'all separate corners and chill out. But it wasn't that type of thing.
Well, that's what's sad is that none of those 6 so-called friends, nobody intervened and said, okay, that's enough.
Right.
We filmed her. This is funny because we saw her getting beaten, but stop it. That's
Right.
enough. It's crazy. Well, I mean, what do you guys think even happened? Because, I saw some clips from Shanquella's Instagram where the first night it looked like they were having a good time. They've got their drinks. They're all sitting around, it looked like they were having fun. It's a beautiful looking resort room. And I saw some video where the 2 girls were like doing push-ups. It looked like they were just goofing around in the resort room. But then the next day they all ganged up on her and beat her up, and people are saying that it looked like she was kind of like drowsy or maybe even drugged up or something because she didn't fight back.
Right. I mean, let's just a group of friends, young, going out. It like I said, it's probably going to be a lot of alcohol and some drugs involved, or drugs involved. Not saying that was the case, but I can speak for myself. When I was that age, and I would go out with my friends, every night was how much you can drink type of thing. So that's something that I think is common for that kind of age demographic. And I'm not really sure what facilitated, but once alcohol is involved, it elevates and escalates everything. And this is wild, but I remember having friends like this where once they start drinking, they overtly got way more aggressive. So knowing that these individuals were like that, it wasn't no like, I can remember once like being out of the club with a friend and a guy, man, I was maybe 20, 21, and a buddy of mine was like, man, that dude over there keeps staring at me. I'm gonna punch him in his face. And I'm like, who are you talking about? He's like, that guy over there. I was like, you mean that guy across those 4 lanes of traffic? Man, if you don't go sit down somewhere. But alcohol has that effect. Alcohol muscles is a true thing that happens. So someone probably got their feelings hurt from something that was said that kind of led to this. And once emotion is involved, for a lot of people, being in a fight creates an emotional high that a lot of people may not have experienced, or some people call it you see red. When you get into a fight or a conflict, you kind of see red and it's hard to turn that thing off. And that's a true phenomenon that happens, especially when alcohol is involved. So I'm sure somebody got their feelings hurt, because most things happen because someone got their feelings hurt or got embarrassed in front of their friends and they wanted to prove a point. I guarantee it was something silly and trivial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Marcus, do you need to leave? I know you said you have your own live stream coming up.
Yeah. I'm about to go ahead and jump off. But hey, it was a pleasure, Judy. Thank you for the invite. I'm definitely going to check you out, Southern Law, because I want to see some of your early gun stuff. I want to know what you was reviewing and what you was talking about.
Lots of good stuff.
Definitely.
It sounds great. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Marcus. If you feel like you need to leave like right now, that's fine. We'll continue on with the live stream for a little bit longer.
No worries. I'll talk to y'all. Thanks for having me. Y'all take care.
Everybody subscribe to Debtfree Dad and Southern Law. Yeah. So, after Shanquella was horribly assaulted and her neck was cracked, she had a spinal fracture. It sounds like the friends tried to prop her up, maybe on the sofa or a chair. And then there was some talk about how she had been like propped up on the toilet or next to the toilet, or her body had been moved around, which is horrible. I mean, can you imagine the pain she must have been in if she didn't die very quickly? And then supposedly the friends also lied to the paramedics about what had happened and claimed that she was just drunk or, alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, and I think her mother said they lied straight to her face too.
Yeah,
and I know her family, her mom, maybe particularly, more than I do if you've been following her, has been very loud on this, which I don't blame her. If she doesn't make noise, what's going to happen? But I think she has been successful in getting the Mexican government to issue a warrant. I think you guys were mentioning that earlier, so that's good, because it is a little bit of a legal quagmire. If somebody's killed overseas by an American citizen, you trust that other government to some degree. Here's why I looked at the law this morning. It was more complicated than I thought. If the United States government wants to do something, there are a lot of hoops to jump through, including with the Attorney General, and then you have to assess the legal system at the other country and whether they can extradite. So it's complicated. But her family making noise is a credit to them. That they've lost their daughter, and they need to be the squeaky wheel to get this moving. So I'm glad her mom's doing that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, how come they haven't arrested Dejanay? And, you would think that law enforcement knows where she is by now, right? They know where she lived, and apparently she had a young child. And I mean, you probably heard this, but apparently at first they thought it was a transgender woman.
No, I didn't know that.
Did you hear that? Oh, okay. Well, apparently the housekeepers at the villa or the Airbnb resort or whatever, like they thought that Dejanay was a man because they saw her wigs and, the bonnet that she was wearing. And people were saying that in the video, she was like punching the heck out of Shanquella like a man would. And they were like, oh, maybe that's really a man. So, I mean, in a way, it's kind of funny because we know she's a perpetrator, or at least one of the perpetrators. But so apparently she is not transgender, despite what some people were saying out there on social media. And, she can't really be in hiding at this point, right? Like her name is all over the place. People know her, and she has a kid. So I wonder where the child is.
Yeah, my understanding was that Mexico had asked for extradition, and I have no idea, who has to sign what pieces of paper before the U.S. citizen can be taken into custody and sent down there. We take a little more cavalier attitude toward it when we get mad at people in other countries versus releasing our own people to other countries. But I hope and I expect that they'll do that as fast as it can be done by the government, and get them down there to face the consequences for what was done to her, because it's terrible. They pretty much almost got away with it. I think if her family hadn't made the noise that they did, they probably would have.
Yeah, and I heard the stupid thing was that so one of the male so-called friends was the one that first started recording the whole beatdown and taunting Shanquella, telling her to get up and fight, or why don't you fight back, or come on, we got places to go, like making fun of her and stuff as this whole thing was happening. So apparently he might have transferred that video to somebody else who put it on social media. Does that sound right?
That sounds familiar to me, that happened.
Yeah, and then somebody else said that the other young lady, Wentor, was the one who was FaceTiming with somebody else and was also videoed, just like taking video footage of this beatdown also. So it's just ridiculous how these people behave. They think, what, you think it's, number one, okay to beat your so-called friend to death, but then start passing around the video and put it on social media? I mean, how stupid can you be? So
fortunately, pretty stupid in this case, since it's going to be what burns them, I hope. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if nobody had recorded it, maybe they could have just gotten away with it and be like, oh, we walked in and she was murdered. We're in Mexico. It's dangerous here. Somebody must have come in and beat her up. I don't know what happened. Well, we're going home. So yeah, absolutely horrendous. Yeah. I mean, have you ever dealt with these types of, criminal cases in your career?
No, no.
Okay. Yeah.
No, only when I was younger did I have anything to do with law enforcement, but it was nothing international like this.
Yeah, pretty big case. So, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I have experience with these types of, international criminal cases either. But from what I've read, it sounds like in Mexico, they only have a few prisons for women, but most of the time the men and women are just stuck in the same jails and prisons. And so obviously there's a lot of assaults and, just mistreatment. They give you, moldy tortillas and barely any food. And usually the prisoners are expected to have their family members bring them food.
That sounds about like me when I was 20. But if I were in Mexico, I would do what I needed to do to not have to go to their prisons. And killing people would be right on the bottom of my list of things to do down there, because, I wouldn't want to be in their prison either. And I think that's where at least one or more of these people are going to go. And that's bad news. For them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know I'm just asking you these odd questions, but do you have any idea? Like, do they get public defenders in Mexico? Like, what's their criminal justice system like?
I don't know. Now that you're asking that, it's making me curious. I don't know how their procedure is, and like, do they have an equivalent of the Fifth Amendment?
Probably not.
What do they do? Yeah, what do they do with these people when they're awaiting trial? How bad is that? We'll have to look at that a little bit. I'm kind of curious about that now.
Yeah. Well, the names of all 6 of those people that went down to Mexico with Shanquella, they have been circulating on social media and different forums and stuff. So shame on all of them. They all had a hand in her death. There were reports that it wasn't just Dejanay beating on her or just Winter, but actually, multiple people were just beating the crap out of her. And just so awful. And plus the fact that she was naked, that was bizarre to me. But apparently her mother said that she liked to sleep in the nude. But I mean, boy, what a horrible thing. I mean, what they think they were going to do, just like pass around some funny video so they and their friends could get some laughs off of it, Yeah,
they did seem to think it was funny in the video, but it's not funny watching it.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dawn Carter, also for the super sticker, and Philly Phil for being here. She has an amazing YouTube channel. What about this case? Have you heard of the Matthew Terry case? Stabbed a girlfriend, was tried and convicted, then released. A few months later, stabbed and killed his next girlfriend, all because of alcohol and subsequent jealousy.
No, where was that at?
I'm sorry. A lot of times people tell me about different criminal cases that they.
Oh no, wait. That's the guy that I do remember it now. That was they streamed part of that. That's the guy that chased her down. The first one that was stabbed didn't die, even though she was stabbed in the neck and he jumped on her and all that. This guy he just would become insanely violent when he was drunk. And they had a video of them. I do remember that. And he's going to jail now. I think the first woman he stabbed was in Michigan, and then the second was in Florida, because the judge said, you should have been in jail in Michigan, but you're in Florida now. You're going to jail and you're not coming out. Yeah, that guy's awful. Absolutely awful.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now I see. Yeah. So Angela is saying it's on the Law and Crime Network.
Yeah.
Well, he looks like a nice businessman in this picture, huh? They always dress him up nicely and put some glasses on the defendant.
Well, the first victim testified, and my wife and I watched that, and we were listening to it, and it's crazier and worse than any fictional crime story or whatever. And she was extremely brave to tell her story, because he put her through it. And he was stabbing her, beating her, smashing her head on the ground, and she ended up living. So she was able to testify to that. I don't know how, whether it was similar acts or something like that, but we watched her testify, and it's just incredible. And he should have been in jail forever on that first one. He should never have gotten out.
Oh, wow. That's horrible. So did this guy even have a job?
I think, like somebody said, he got out of jail and then moved down there. I don't know what he was doing when he was down there.
Yeah. Yeah. So once again, so many crazy, weird criminal cases going on in Florida. But thanks to their sunshine laws, we get to see all of it, right, on different networks and YouTube channels.
Yeah, the face-eating guy just got not guilty by reason of insanity. So they are running through some bad ones down there right now.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that too. But does that mean, is he going to be put in a mental institution, or is he just set free?
What was weird about that was, because I turned it on the other day just to listen to it while I was doing some other things, and the judge started talking about, you got anything else? Let's let the victims talk. And I thought the trial was going to start. Well, the state collapsed. They just gave up on the case like the week before. I think their expert bailed on them, and the family was furious. So the family would get up, say something terrible to the killer, and then turn around and say about the same level of anger toward the state, because they felt completely abandoned, that they didn't even try, because insanity defense in Florida is an affirmative defense, and the defendant has to prove it by clear and convincing evidence. And he did have evidence that he was insane, but you could put him to the test of proving it for sure. And they laid out a pretty good case that maybe he was on drugs at that time. I mean, why else would you do what he did? He hadn't had prior episodes of violence from insanity or anything. So that was sad to see the family feel that abandoned. Like I'm a fan of the DA in Wake County, and I think she has a good team. And I think that county in Florida maybe does not have that quality team, because the family was not prepared for what happened in that courtroom. It was awful.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes the criminal justice system makes you feel so frustrated, thinking, how can this injustice happen? Yeah.
Well, in North Carolina, at least the cases I know about, if you're not guilty by reason of insanity and you're committed, and say you killed somebody, you're in there. I mean, you're in there. There are people that when I was young, just starting practice, who were still committed, but the family in this case said the state told them expect him to be 6 to 12 months committed, which I was, and I had to watch that interview with the brother saying that, because I couldn't believe that. Like, how could you think this guy's safe in 6 to 12 months with the crimes that he did? I don't know. That is not really what happens in my experience in North Carolina. If you go in with that level of violent history, then you're not going to waltz out in 6 to 12 months after taking a pill and saying, I see life differently now. I'm no longer dangerous. Just let me roam the countryside free. I don't think that happens here.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. So, are you from Raleigh? Did you grow up around here?
Not well. I went to school here in the '80s, and then came back after practicing somewhere else in the state in Winston-Salem, and so I've been here for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I think somebody way back early on in the chat had a question, wanted to know if you have read all those books behind you.
I've read a lot of them, and I don't know how you feel about this. My general view is I should never not have a book in the house that I haven't read. Like, there should always be things to explore in your house. Of course, I'm old enough to be before the internet. So I still have books I haven't read, but I have read a lot because that's what I used to do was read a lot. It's mostly history and religion and things like that.
Yeah, I like reading books, but after a while, I just don't like having all the stuff sitting around. So I usually try to give away my old books or sell them or, find a new home for them.
Yeah,
So,
there are a lot here, and when we move, there's no way I'll move all these. So hopefully they'll find a good home to go to for the next
yeah,
rodeo.
that's great.
If
Yeah.
anybody still reads anywhere, I don't know.
Yeah, I think people still like reading. I like having a real paper book instead of some sort of, like what do you call it? Kindle. Yeah, that newfangled thing. Actually, it's not that new anymore, but
No, it's not.
Kindle's been
Yeah.
around for quite a while, but I never got one. So, yeah. Well, so what are some interesting cases you have worked on? Do you feel like sharing anything about your legal career?
Well, I mean, I've been involved in some interesting ones. Some of these things you don't know what you should say about them or not,
Yeah.
depending on who your client was, right? But at least in terms of talking about what we've been talking about, I've spent time with a mass killer in North Carolina inside of a mental institution with the person working on stuff. So I've seen the inside of that and seen what a person goes through in a situation like that in this state, at least, and how they're handled and what their mindset is. And that helps me because I have a dim view of people who murder other people. But I can say that I've personally, seen and met people, or at least a person, who was truly mentally ill and had issues that were real, that wasn't fake or whatever like that. So, and it's not, or it wasn't then a resort. If you were put into this secure mental facility, it wasn't a resort. It'd be like the last resort. When I got locked into it with the doors shutting behind me, I'm like, okay, this is some real stuff here. So that's kind of interesting. It helps color, some of these cases that you see. And, if you're practicing law long enough, you see a lot of weird things, right?
No, yeah, totally. Like even people that seem normal at first, and you realize something's wrong. There's something mentally off about this person. Yeah, but in that situation, were you like a criminal appellate counsel for that person?
No, it was a civil issue for the person.
Oh,
And so something that they needed, but it was, the person's highly intelligent, very, very smart person. And it was contemporaneous almost with me in law school. Oops, I just outed probably who the person is, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, so, but it wasn't something that became public. That's why I'm not really talking about it, but it's more about what the experience of going through it, the facility itself, and seeing what it's like for somebody who is in that position of adjudicated not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a secure facility. In this state, it's not fun time. It's basically like prison, or was anyway.
well,
And they're medicated, and the guards are big, things are locked, it's all gray. It wasn't a place you'd want to end up.
well, but were there any activities for the prisoners? Like classes or art class, or learning about different things, or
Yeah.
they sit around playing cards?
Yeah. Now, when I would meet, that was just us. So it wasn't anything like that going on. They would have a space for us to get together. And, so it worked out fine. The person was fine when we discussed. It was a very logical and highly intelligent person, which sometimes they are, right? You can be extremely smart, but if something is wrong in your mind, then that one was real. That one was certainly real. And I'm not a softie on criminals.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. Okay, I'm starting. I think I sort of know what case you might have been involved in. Yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering. So was that person put in there indefinitely?
Well, they have to get evaluated every so often and say, are you a danger to yourself or others? And that's, I think, pretty much the same standard in Florida, which was what stunned me, that the state would tell the family that this guy could get out so quickly. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know if that's true in Florida. I mean, I really wonder, why would they be told that? Surely in Florida, they can't or don't routinely take somebody with this level of violence and say, well, we can cure them or provide them a cure. Because, for instance, in a situation that we had in North Carolina with a person who had a mental issue and was being treated, and then that chain of treatment was broken, and the person got off the medication, and then the mental illness came back strong, and he ended up killing the people in Chapel Hill. And that was somebody who ended up safe under medication and then got off the medication. So like this guy in Florida, if you medicate him there and you let him out right away, how do you know his behavior will be that he continues to follow the treatment plan? I don't know. I think you have to be very careful when you've got somebody who stabbed 2 people to death and trying to chew somebody's face off before you just let them back out into the community 6 to 12 months.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I can't believe that would really happen. But it was traumatic to the family to hear that might happen. That's awful.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you want to move away. These people are loose in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We can't, because weren't the victims just hanging out in their own driveway when the person came by and ate them?
Yeah. They were in their garage, which they would keep open and talk to neighbors and things like that. And this guy stormed out of, I guess, a dinner with his family and went down the street with a knife that his father had bought him. And he had been on every kind of drug imaginable, that at least the list was pretty comprehensive, and wandered in there and attacked one of them first, I think maybe the female first, and then but just brutally killed them both. Awful.
Oh, so awful. Well, yeah. Well, speaking of Florida, so you probably realized that a lot of my viewership are really engrossed in the Dan Markel, the law professor murder case in Florida. And so, of course, Angela is here. Thank you, Angela, for making all the comments. She says, Steve has had interesting experiences. Maybe pick his brain on the Dan Markel case. So have you been following that or reading anything about the Dan Markel law professor murder for hire case?
To some degree, because I know the parameters more or less of what happened, which is, these high-powered families fighting with each other. I think the victim was a law professor, and his wife was a lawyer too. And then they hired, or the brother of the wife got the hit person, his receptionist, I think, got the
or his ex-girlfriend. Yeah,
his girlfriend. Yeah, it's even deeper than I knew then, and hired the guy to come, or 2 people I think were involved in it, and shooting this guy on the spot. So, boy, is that awful. That's awful.
Yeah. Well, have you ever heard of divorce cases that just totally got out of hand? I mean, it sounds like you haven't done divorce cases.
Yeah. I mean, and I commented, I think, on an earlier stream of yours when you had talked about, how don't murder people before you go to mediation, which is a really good piece of advice generally to give people. But, that case is one, when you have divorce cases or child custody cases, the emotions can get really high and people can feel trapped and like they're getting pushed around in the legal system. So my view on divorce stuff was, I never do it except if it's a friend of mine and it's absolutely uncontested. Any hint, because people, you're a lawyer, everybody asks you to do things because lawyers cost money, and I do things for my friends, but I'm like, if there's any issue between you, I won't do it, because I just won't. I'm not trained in it. I'm not no specialist for it, and it's not my thing to be able to navigate that, because I would rather the people be collaborative. And I think I brought up on your prior stream the Nancy Cooper case here, which to me had overtones of perhaps the domestic situation was what really fueled the dispute they had that he ended up killing her.
Yeah, strangling her. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just down the street from where I live, and so I remember seeing the flyers and stuff for her before they found her. So that was awful. But I think that, to me, that's what kind of caused that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like a divorce and custody battle where people feel like it's my way or the highway, and, you can't have your way, so I'm going to kill you. So. Yeah.
Well, my recollection was she had put a proposal on the table that was almost all of what he made, and he probably
she wanted
didn't like
everything.
that. Yeah, and that's, I don't know. I like more collaborative, realistic situations between people rather than something that can really ramp people up, especially with kids in the middle. I mean, usually it ends up working out, right? But in that one, it did not. He took the till death do we part as like a loophole for divorce, and it's not. So he's like, well, I'll just kill you. How about that? That resolves all our issues, and it didn't. And I don't think he'd had any past violent behavior or anything. So just awful.
Yeah, he had some sort of nice, high-paying, RTP type job. No criminal background, and seemed like a family man with 2 kids, and seemed like it was a perfect family. Yeah, so very sad. I mean, yeah. What about? Do you remember the Michelle Young case that was all over the news in Raleigh? Also, where her husband also killed her because they were getting divorced, and he didn't want her to have custody of the kid.
Yeah, that's just down here off of Penny Road, so that's also down the street. Nancy Cooper was a little bit over from here, but the Michelle, from where I live now, the Michelle Young case was just, and of course, I completely believe he did it. And it's terrible that it took so long, and then when he surprised the DA's team when he testified the first time, and I think he got a hung jury, but then the second trial, they were able to use his testimony against him. I was like, hell yeah, thank God they hung that jury, because that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal, what he did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess you remember more about it than I did, because I forgot that there was a hung jury the first time. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's just like so many crazy cases around. The sad thing is that I was looking for news about today's, the whole Andy Banks Craigslist car sale case, and it wasn't even at the very top of some of the news sites, because there's some other, crime, murder, the kids that were left behind in the back of the car in Rocky Mount when their parents had been shot,
Wow.
and then the Hedingham recent shootings in Raleigh, it just seems like, wow, there's so much crime that this case didn't even make it to be the main news today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's terrible, because it should be, because it was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Which brings us back. So since you're passionate about guns and gun rights, I don't know if you'd like to talk briefly about, do you feel like everybody should have a gun these days? Given the amount of crazy violent crime, and feels like you can't even trust people around you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say no to that. I think what Marcus said earlier, situational awareness, which is just, you're not going to be able to control random events, but just be as safe as you can. I'm pro-gun because, I grew up with them out in the country. I was in the Army. I was a competitive shooter when I was younger. We have a lot of guns. My whole family shoots. So if you feel like you want one and you're willing to invest the time that it takes to know how to use it and be safe with it around other family members, then, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But just to say, well, have a gun could be an artificial sense of security, because I certainly have met people who've bought them. They don't know how to work them. They don't have any interest in the gun, right? They just thought they needed it to feel safe. Now it's up in the closet. They don't really know how to load it or use it or whatever. Is it making them safer or making the situation more dangerous or not doing anything for them? So I think that's a very personal situation. And there are certainly people who should never have a gun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like the guns wind up in the wrong hands, like people that really shouldn't have even had them in the first place.
Yeah.
Or can't control themselves and go around shooting everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You've probably heard about all these random shootings around, Highway 55, I-85, even in the RTP area, where someone's just driving along towards Durham and you get shot. It's just, I don't know. It's gotten to the point where I feel like I need to hide in the house now.
You probably see this too. And I know from law enforcement friends that the gang, the level of, gang or semi-gang activity in North Carolina is just higher than you think it would be. And the people in them are younger, many juveniles, and lots of shootings and revenge shootings, and this person shooting at this person and they're just shooting because they don't care who they shoot at. You see that all over the place. I think these days, it seems like it's awful. Kids with guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just again, like the false sense of security, I'm thinking about Andy Banks again, because based on what I saw, he seemed like kind of a tall guy who was healthy, 39 years old. So he probably didn't think that he was at risk of being abducted or shot at or whatever. And even if he had a gun, that probably wouldn't have saved him because he wouldn't have had the time to go and reach for his gun and shoot back at the guy.
Yeah, right. And then that's why I say what Marcus said, just try and put yourself in safe situations is the best advice, because you don't know if you're going to be able to do an OK Corral shootout at the last second or not. Like, that should be your last resort. If you have a gun, that should be your very last resort. And you shouldn't put yourself into more dangerous situations than you otherwise would be in just because you do have a gun. Like, I have a gun almost all the time. I carry a gun in stores and stuff. But what I wouldn't want to do is let that influence me to do something I wouldn't ordinarily do. That's stupid. I don't ever have to use it as the right answer for having it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so sometimes people have also asked me too, like, did you ever feel like you were in danger being an attorney?
Me?
Yeah. Like people coming into your office, or angry opposing counsel, angry opposing pro se parties.
Well, now, you get some pro se people who are not at all mentally there. When I was young, I used to represent the police department for a larger city in North Carolina. And so if the police had a brutality case, or somebody got hurt and you want to sue the police or something like that, then I would represent the police officers on behalf of the city. And of course, they had a lot of immunity for that, but it doesn't keep people from trying, depending on back then. I don't really know what the law is now, but back then, if you could show gross negligence or whatever. But there was a woman who would just sue the police and say they had abused her even when they hadn't. And so she was filing lawsuits. And so I would have to talk to her. And one time she called me at my office and said, I know you've put my law books back, so I can't finish my research. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she was at the library and she had gotten these books together. And when she came back, she told me they're gone. Oh. I'm like, well, first of all, I couldn't have been down there doing that because this wasn't in the age of cell phones. You just called me at my office. And so we had a little dispute over it. And she said, and she accused the Discovery of being a fishing expedition. And she's like, I'm surprised you didn't ask me my shoe size. And I'm like, well, I already know that. And then she sat there and she goes, you probably do. So yeah, I mean, you get some crazy ones, but I didn't think that they would ever kill me. But representing the police department, sometimes you'd have to go to a crime scene, a real crime scene or something like that. And that might be a place in the neighborhood where people kind of realize you're there on behalf of the government and they're not the friendliest to you. But I didn't really, when I was young, I didn't really care. I didn't worry about things like that. So as much as I would, but I was, I wasn't worried about it, but it was probably sometimes more dangerous than you know, because something can happen to you at any moment, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad nothing bad happened to you. I mean, that does sound like kind of a risky job when you're defending police officers.
Yeah, that was fun though. It was, some of that was fun. Mostly they were in the right. Mm-hmm. And it's probably tougher these days, but the law may be different too. Maybe they pay out settlements faster. Back then, they would not settle a case if they wouldn't pay you one penny if they didn't think they had legal liability. For one thing, they didn't want immunity to be overturned and all that. Mm-hmm. But John Edwards went to work on that though when he got the large settlement from Durham from the police chase case, I think. But John Edwards, could get a settlement on anything back in the day. That dude was good.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about that case. That was before I moved to North Carolina. So, yeah, interesting. So what kind of cases do you take on now?
Just people I know, small businesses and friends and things like that. And just, part-time. And then I do other things.
Oh,
we
okay.
Travel, we travel a lot and, we hike and travel and stuff. And then when people need stuff, I get in there and do it. But, I'm more about resolving things. I don't like to sue if I don't have to, but I have done it a couple of times since the whole COVID thing. Mm-hmm. It's annoying.
Yeah. Same here. Like I'm just kind of tired of litigation, like every time, somebody comes to me and they want to sue or they might need a sue. I'm like, God, do I really want to take on another litigation case? Because it could just drag on for 2 years. And, it's usually pretty miserable after a while. So it's nothing really that exciting, civil litigation usually.
No. Yeah. And I, if it's people I know, I will do it if they want me to do it. But I always tell them, you are so much better off if we find a path out of this. Sometimes people have their back up or their ego up and they want to get the other person or whatever. But if you relay your experiences to them, a lot of times you can get them back to reality and get it over with without that, because people don't normally win in litigation. I mean, the lawyers win, and I don't mean that negatively, because it's the people who force the lawyers into it. But eventually people get worn down and the cases settle because it's expensive, it's time consuming. After a year or two, you're not so mad about it anymore, you know. And so if you can dodge all that and reach a settlement before any of that ever happens, I think that's much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm all for, mediating, as I talked about in a previous live stream, doing collaborative divorce, any sort of alternative dispute resolution process that keeps people out of the court system. I think that's really a great thing for everybody involved. Yeah. So, well, it looks like I've been asking people if they wanted to join in. Feel free to click on the link, but we don't have anybody else that wants to get on the camera and share their point of view on some of these cases. So maybe we'll go ahead and wrap this up for tonight then, since it's almost an hour and a half.
Yeah, sounds good. I think you covered a lot of ground. You covered all the cases that you mentioned to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to just do something totally different and off the wall in a couple of days, because I'm kind of tired of covering all this depressing news. So I'm going to have kind of like a 6,000 subscriber celebration end of the year piano concert.
Oh, that's cool.
Starring me with my easy piano classics. So we'll see if anybody actually wants to tune in. But people are welcome to ask any sort of law related questions, like ask a lawyer Q&A, knowing that it's just for entertainment purposes, right? So I think I'll just do that to spice up the channel, so we can kind of have something a little bit more positive and happy, instead of always talking about all these horrible things.
These cases are terrible. They are terrible.
Yeah, they are, but they also spark so much interest, and people really want to discuss things like the whole Dan Markel case. And, I really hope that there's going to be justice soon. I mean, you heard about how Katie Magbanua is now becoming a state witness, or she's proffering. Yeah.
She's already sentenced, right? So I don't know how they intervened to help her, or if she just decided if she's found the Lord or something like that and wants to do right, or what her change of heart is.
Or she's just desperate and self-serving as usual. It's not because she found the Lord.
I think your assessment is probably the correct one.
Yeah. So this is just something about Florida law, that apparently even after you've been convicted and sentenced to life in prison, there's still a hope and a prayer that maybe you could get the sentence changed potentially if you have a proffer. Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you so much, Steve. It's really nice meeting you through YouTube.
You too, and have a good weekend.
Yeah. I hope everybody also subscribes to your channel, Southern Law. So
can't get enough lawyers, right?
Yeah, I don't know if people really want to spend more time with lawyers, but we'll see. So good luck with your channel, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Judy. Have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining in today, and hopefully you guys will tune in later. On Sunday, I haven't really decided on the time, but maybe around 5 p.m. I will play some of my easy little piano ditties, and if I mess up, oh well, we'll intermingle it with some talk about any other cases or any legal issues that people want to ask about. So have a great weekend, and hope to see you guys on Sunday afternoon then. Thank you.